The Relentless had been running dark for 8 months. No lights on the outside. No broadcast signals. No pings sent out into the black. Just a long, quiet ship moving through the Varith corridor like a stone dropped into deep water, going down, making no sound, disturbing nothing. Captain Ethan Cole liked it that way. He was standing at the back of the bridge when the sound came. Not a loud sound. Not an alarm or a siren. Just a low, steady tone coming from a receiver panel that most ships didn't even have installed. Cole had put it in himself before they left dock. Old habit. Border war habit. The kind of habit that kept a man breathing when other habits got men killed. Private Sasha Greer was the one monitoring it. She had her headset on and she was reading something, a thin paperback she'd folded back on itself, when the tone changed. She stopped reading. She pulled the headset tight against her ears. She sat very still for about 4 seconds, which on Sasha Greer was a long time. Then she took the headset off and stared at the panel. Cole noticed. He walked over. "What is it?" he said. Not a question. More like a door opening. "I don't know," Greer said. "It's a pattern. Same cluster of frequencies, repeating. Not random." Cole put the second headset on and listened. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't anything that sounded like words. It was a series of tones, rising and falling in a shape that felt deliberate. Like someone knocking on a door with a specific rhythm because they knew you'd recognize it. He listened for 30 seconds. Then he took the headset off. "Trace the origin point," he said. It took the navigation system 11 minutes to find it. The signal was coming from a region of space called the Ethery Belt, a cluster of inhabited systems about 40 light hours from the Varith corridor. The Ethery Conclave. Cole knew the name the same way he knew the names of cities he'd never visited. They existed. They were there. They had never been important to anything he was doing. Lieutenant Owen Burke came onto the bridge, still pulling his jacket straight. He was 24 and tried not to look it. Most days he almost managed. "What's going on?" he said. "Distress signal," Cole said. Burke looked at the panel, then at Cole. "From who?" "Ethery Conclave." Burke processed this. "We have no diplomatic contact with the Ethery Conclave." "No," Cole said. "So we're not supposed to be monitoring their frequencies?" "No," Cole said. Burke waited for more. Cole didn't give him more. That was the whole conversation as far as Cole was concerned. Sergeant Dana Pierce came in from the corridor with a coffee in one hand and a look on her face like she'd already heard everything and found it mildly entertaining. Pierce always looked like she'd already heard everything. It was one of the things that made her good at her job. "Distress call," she said. "Yeah," Greer said. "From the Ethery people?" "Yeah." Pierce took a sip of her coffee. "What are they saying?" "They're not saying anything in words," Greer told her. "It's a mathematical pattern. Universal distress architecture. Any civilization that knows math would recognize it." "So it's a scream," Pierce said. "Basically yes," Greer said. Pierce looked at Cole. Cole was already at the navigation panel. Burke stepped forward. "Captain, we need to contact Fleet Command before we do anything. There are protocols for first contact situations. There are rules of engagement that." "The signal is 11 hours old," Cole said. "By the time we get approval from Fleet Command, we'll be waiting here while whatever is happening over there finishes happening." Burke opened his mouth. Cole looked at him. Burke closed his mouth. Private Nate Calloway appeared in the doorway. He was from Memphis and built like a man who'd spent his whole life moving heavy things, which was more or less true. He was the unit's demolition specialist, which meant he thought about breaking things the way other people thought about breathing, constantly and without effort. "Heard we got a call," he said. "Distress signal," Pierce told him. "Some alien civilization we've never talked to." Calloway thought about this for about 2 seconds. "What's the enemy hardware look like?" "We don't know yet," Cole said. "Okay," Calloway said, and went back down the corridor. A minute later they heard the sound of equipment cases being opened. Burke watched him go. "Is he already prepping ordnance?" That's what he does, Pierce said. We haven't even decided to go yet. Pierce looked at Burke with the expression of a woman who had decided to be patient with him because she liked him. Burke, she said, look at the captain. Burke looked at Cole. Cole was plotting a course. Burke looked back at Pierce. We've decided, Pierce said, and finished her coffee. The course Cole plotted took them to the edge of ethery space in 10 hours, approaching from behind the gravity shadow of Lethvas's moon. It was a maneuver from the Border War playbook, designed to mask their arrival from any sensor array watching the standard approach lanes. When they came out of it, they would appear on no one's screens. They would arrive as nothing. It was the only way Cole knew how to arrive anywhere. Greer put her headset back on. She listened to the signal the whole way. All 10 hours. Not because she was analyzing it anymore, she'd pulled everything she could from it in the first hour. She listened because there was something in it that sat in her chest like a cold hand. A civilization that had never asked for help before, broadcasting a scream in every direction because there was nothing else left to do. She'd felt that before. Not in space. Somewhere smaller and closer and long ago. She listened until the tone changed, around hour 9, and became something worse than a scream. It became silence. The signal stopped. She pulled off the headset and told Cole. He was at the viewport. Lethvas was visible now, hanging large and blue-green in the dark. Below its orbit, something was burning. They could see it from here, a small, bright smear of light where the ethery defense station sat, or had sat, or was currently being taken apart. Burke came and stood next to Cole. For a long moment neither of them said anything. The signals stopped, Burke said. I know, Cole said. That could mean they're already. It could, Cole said. Another silence. Or it could mean, Cole said, that whatever hit them hit the transmitter. And they're still there. Burke looked at the burning light above the planet. We're going in either way, Burke said. It wasn't a question anymore. Yes, Cole said. Burke nodded slowly, like a man settling a weight onto his shoulders and deciding it was manageable. I'll take the ship, he said. While you're over there. Good, Cole said. He turned from the viewport and walked toward the armory corridor. Pierce fell in behind him without being told. Down the corridor, the sound of Calloway's equipment cases stopped. He'd finished. Everything was ready. The Relentless moved out of the moon's shadow. The burning station filled the viewport. Cole put his helmet on. The corridor between the moon's shadow and the station was about 6,000 kilometers of open space. For a Terran vessel running dark, that was nothing. Cole had crossed worse gaps with worse odds and worse equipment, back in the years before space became the problem and other things were. The Relentless moved through it without a sound, without a broadcast, without a single photon leaving its hull that didn't have to. It was a ship that knew how to disappear. So did the people on it. In the armory bay, Pierce was running the unit through kit checks. She did it the way she did everything, without drama, without theater, just one thing after another until all the things were done. Calloway, she said. Good, he said, without looking up from his pack. Greer. Good, Greer said. She was checking her long rifle with the focused attention of a woman reading a letter she'd already memorized. Her hands didn't shake. They never shook. Cole had noticed that about her on the first deployment and filed it somewhere important. Burke staying with the ship, Pierce said to the group, not making it an announcement, just a fact being placed in the room. He know how to handle the guns? Calloway asked. He'll figure it out, Pierce said. That's a yes, Calloway decided, and went back to his pack. The unit was 8 Marines total. Pierce knew all of them. Had served with most of them through at least one bad situation and one worse one. They were not the biggest unit the Terran Expeditionary Force had ever fielded. They were not the best equipped. What they were was the kind of group that, when things went sideways, got very quiet and very focused, which was more valuable than size and better than most equipment. Cole came in while they were finishing checks. He didn't give a speech. Cole never gave speeches. He looked at the unit and said, Crothul hegemony. 1 destroyer-class vessel confirmed, possibly 2. They've been running expansions for 60 years across this sector. Every species they've encountered either ran or surrendered. A pause. They've never encountered anyone who did neither, he said. That was the whole briefing. Calloway looked interested in the way a man looks interested when someone describes a lock he hasn't opened yet. Pierce pulled up the station schematics on the portable display. Leth 7, an ethery defense station, built for administration and light orbital management, not for war. The ethery were not a warrior civilization. They built things. They managed systems. They governed. Their military existed the way a smoke alarm exists, installed, tested occasionally, never actually needed until now. The station had 11 access corridors. 3 of them had been breached by the Crothall boarding team. Pierce identified them on the display and then identified 8 others. We go in through Maintenance Corridor 9, she said. It's been sealed since the station was built. Hasn't been used. Which means the Crothall don't know it exists. How do you know they don't know? Greer asked. Because they haven't blown it up yet, Pierce said. They blow up everything they know about. This was accurate. The Crothall assault pattern, such as it was, had no subtlety in it. They came through the front. They came large. They applied force until the force worked. It had worked 60 years in a row because the species they applied it to responded the way reasonable species respond to overwhelming force. They yielded. The Crothall were not expecting a species that would yield by going sideways and coming up through Maintenance Corridor 9. Cole watched his unit and thought about the border wars. Not with any pain. Just the way a carpenter thinks about all the wood he's worked, as information, as material, as something that shaped his hands into what they were now. 8 years of fighting in tight corridors against people who knew the same corridors. Humans against humans, which was the worst kind because there were no knowledge gaps, no tactical surprises, no moments where one side didn't understand what the other was doing. It had been terrible. It had also produced a very specific kind of soldier. The kind that didn't need open ground. Greer came and stood next to Cole while the others finished their checks. She looked at the schematic. EVA to the Crothall vessel, she said. You and 2 others, Cole said. Hull approach from the blind side. I need their communications dead before they can call for more ships. Greer looked at the schematic for a moment longer. How many crew on a Crothall destroyer? Unknown, Cole said. She nodded. Okay, she said, and went back to her rifle. It was the whole conversation. Cole appreciated that about Greer. The Relentless came in slow and matched the station's rotation from below. Burke was at the helm, which meant his hands were sweating but his inputs were clean. He'd done the simulation 40 times in the last 2 hours. He didn't need to tell anyone that. The ship docked without a sound. In the airlock, Pierce was next to Cole. The light above the exterior door was red, then cycling. You good? Cole said. My left boot has a small hole in it, Pierce said. Other than that. That's a yes, Cole said. That's a yes, she agreed. The door opened. What came in first was the smell, the particular smell of a station that had been burning from the inside for hours. Burnt wiring. Burnt atmosphere. Something else underneath that wasn't a Terran smell, something biological from the ethery side of the station that Cole filed away and didn't think about. They moved in. The corridor was dark. Emergency lighting only, red strips along the floor, the kind of light that turns everything into shapes and edges. The Marines moved through it in single file, each one staying in the step space of the person ahead, each one reading the corridor with their body as much as their eyes. Greer peeled off at the junction with 2 others and went the other direction, toward the exterior hull access. Cole didn't watch her go. He knew she'd be there. The first ethery they saw was crouched behind a collapsed section of wall, 12 limbs pulled in tight, bioluminescence flickering the pale gray of a species trying very hard to be invisible. The ethery looked at the Marines. The Marines looked at the ethery. Cole held up one hand, the universal gesture that meant wait, be still, we are not what you're afraid of. The ethery's bioluminescence flickered something complicated. Cole kept moving. There would be time for introductions. First, there was work. 2 corridors ahead, they could hear the Crothall. The sound they made was low and heavy, the sound of large bodies moving through spaces not built for them, and under it a clipped vocalization that the translation unit on Cole's wrist identified as command language. Orders being given. Cole looked at Pierce. Pierce looked at Calloway. Calloway smiled, which was the expression he wore when he was about to be very good at his job. They moved to the junction. Cole checked the corner. 4 Crothall soldiers in the corridor ahead, each one about 4 meters tall, armored in layered exoskeletal plates that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. They moved like machinery that had learned to be impatient. Cole pulled back. Held up 4 fingers. Pierce nodded. Calloway was already reaching into his pack. The corridor was about to get a lot smaller. Thinking, Calloway set the charge and they moved back around the corner and the corridor made a sound like a door slamming in a very large house. Then they moved forward. The Crothall soldiers in that section of corridor were not dead. That was not the point of the charge. The point was that they were now dealing with a collapsed section of ceiling and a wall that had shifted 2 feet into the corridor space and a smoke condition that their optical sensors were not designed for. The point was that they were busy. Cole went through the smoke first. The fighting in the next 40 seconds was the kind that happens in tight spaces between people who know tight spaces and people who don't. The Crothall were bigger. They were armored. In an open field they would have been something close to unstoppable. In a corridor with 3 feet of clearance on either side and a ceiling they had to bend to avoid, they were a problem with a solution, and Cole's unit had been solving problems like this since before any of them had left the planet. It was over before the smoke cleared. Pierce moved through the corridor with Cole while the rest of the unit secured the junction. She was cataloging the damage with the calm attention of a woman checking items off a list. There were more Crothall on the upper level, they could hear the movement through the deck plating. Methodical. Unhurried. The movement of a force that had never had reason to hurry because things always went the way they expected. Cole got on the comm to Calloway. Upper level. Junction 4. Already on it, Calloway said. Cole didn't ask what that meant. He'd find out when it mattered. The station's command center was on the 3rd level. That was where Voketh was. They reached him through a maintenance hatch that Pierce had identified on the schematic, a small, ugly climb through a shaft that smelled like burning insulation and something chemical that Cole's suit filtered without complaint. At the top of the shaft there was a hatch. Cole pushed it open and came up into the command center from the floor, which was not an entrance the room's designers had considered. Voketh was at the central console with 3 other Etheri. When the hatch opened they moved back against the far wall in a collective flinch, all 12 limbs of each one drawing in tight, bioluminescence going pale. Cole climbed out of the floor. Pierce came up behind him. The Etheri stared. Voketh was the tallest of them. He had the bearing of a commander even in a species Cole had never seen before. There was something in the way he held himself that was recognizable across the biological gap. A person who was used to being in charge, currently in a situation where being in charge meant very little. Cole's translation unit came on. It was a small device on his wrist that managed rough field translation for known and semi-known languages. Etheri standard was in the database, barely enough to work with. "We are Terran Marines," Cole said. The translation unit processed it and produced something in Etheri frequency tones that Cole couldn't hear but that made Voketh's bioluminescence flicker sharply. "We received your distress signal. We are here to assist." Voketh said something. The translation unit gave him a 3-second delay and then, "Who sent you?" "No one," Cole said. Another flicker. "Who authorized your presence in Etheri space?" "The signal," Cole said. "You asked." "We came." Voketh was quiet for a moment. His bioluminescence moved through several colors that the translation unit had no emotional mapping for. He looked at Cole. Then at Pierce. Then at the hatch in the floor they had come through. "How many of you are there?" he said. "Enough," Cole said. That was not a boast. It was a calculation. Cole had run it 3 times on the approach and each time it came back the same. It would be enough or it wouldn't, and if it wasn't there was nothing more to be done about it at this point. Pierce touched Cole's arm. 2 fingers. Quick. That meant she'd heard something. Cole heard it too. Upper level. Calloway's section. The sound was significant. "What was that?" Voketh said. That was our demolition specialist, Pierce told him. He found the Crothall boarding team on your upper deck. Found them, Voketh said, like the word was a shape he was turning over. Found them, Pierce confirmed. The sound from the upper deck stopped. Then Calloway's voice came over the comm, calm as a weather report, upper level clear. Pierce looked at Voketh. Found them, she said again. Outside, in vacuum, Sasha Greer was on the hull of the Crothall destroyer. She had gone EVA 20 minutes earlier with 2 other Marines, Ruiz and a tall, quiet woman named Kara Flynn who had once, on a different deployment, climbed a burning building to reach a communications relay and come down the other side like she'd just stepped off an elevator. Flynn was useful in situations that required moving through environments that were actively trying to kill you. The Crothall hull was not actively trying to kill them. It was just cold and large and had been designed by a species that had never considered the possibility of being boarded, which meant there were no external defensive systems, no sensors watching the hull surface, no fail-safes for a 3-person team in magnetic boots moving hand over hand toward the communications array on the vessel's dorsal section. Greer reached it first. It was larger than the schematics had suggested, the Crothall built big, because they were big, because everything they made was scaled to their size and their certainty about the universe. The array was a cluster of transmission hardware the size of a small building, bristling with dish receivers and signal boosters pointed in every direction. Greer looked at it for about 4 seconds. Then she looked at Flynn. Flynn was already opening her pack. They were not going to destroy it. Destroying it would leave debris signatures and thermal readings that would tell any Crothall reinforcement force exactly what had happened. Instead, Greer pulled the access panel on the array's primary transmitter and spent the next 8 minutes doing something careful and precise with the internal wiring, the kind of thing that left no mark and no heat bloom but meant that when the Crothall commander tried to call home, the signal would go out and come back to him in a loop, quietly, like a phone that rang in an empty room. The Crothall would not know their communications were dead until they tried to use them. By then it would be too late for the knowledge to help. Greer sealed the access panel and they moved back across the hull. Inside the station, Cole had established a defensive perimeter around the command center. The remaining Crothall on the station, 6 soldiers, based on Pierce's count, were consolidating toward the station's main hangar, which meant they were either preparing to withdraw or preparing to push. Cole didn't know which yet and treated both possibilities the same way. He put his people in the corridors and waited. Voketh watched all of this from the command center doorway. He watched Cole move his unit with hand signals alone, no voices, each Marine reading the signals and moving into position with the automatic precision of people who had done this so many times that their bodies knew it before their minds did. He had commanded forces. He understood command. He had never seen anything that looked like this. "How long have you been soldiers?" he said. Cole thought about it. "Long enough," he said. Voketh's bioluminescence shifted into the frequency he used for understanding something he wished he'd known sooner. Down the corridor, the Crothall were moving. The Crothall came through the corridor at Junction 7 in a 3-point push, which was a textbook assault formation for open ground engagement and nearly useless in a station hallway. Cole had been counting on that. The junction was a cross-shaped intersection 40 meters from the command center. The Crothall expected to take it and push through. What they found at the junction was nothing, no resistance, no Marines, just the empty red-lit crossing of corridors in all 4 directions. They slowed. That was the tell Cole had been waiting for. The moment a Crothall force slowed was the moment they were uncertain, and the moment they were uncertain was the moment Pierce, stationed in the left branch of the junction behind a collapsed section of wall, said, "Now, into the comm." What happened next was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was efficient, which is a different thing entirely and much worse to be on the receiving end of. The Marines had the corners. The Crothall had the open middle. The Crothall were 4 meters tall and armored, and in the open middle they were exactly as exposed as a target can be. The engagement lasted less than 90 seconds. Cole came out from the right branch when it was over. He looked at what remained. He looked at his unit. "Anyone down?" he said. "I'm good," Calloway said. "Good," said Ruiz, from somewhere in the smoke. "Good," said Flynn, coming in from the far branch. Pierce came from the left. She was moving right, but there was something in the way she was moving, a slight angle to her body, a held-out arm that she brought back in too fast when Cole looked at her, that told him something had happened. She met his eyes. She didn't say anything about it. She said, "6 down." "That's all of them on the station." Cole looked at her for a second longer. "Yeah," Pierce said, answering the question he hadn't asked. "I'm fine." She wasn't entirely fine, but she was operational, and operational was what mattered right now, and Pierce had been making this particular call about herself since before Cole had known her. He trusted her to know where the line was. He turned back to the corridor. On the destroyer, the Crothall commander was trying to reach his vessel's control systems through a secondary console. The primary was down, not destroyed, just unresponsive, in the way that a thing is unresponsive when someone has been inside it and rearranged what it knows about itself. He tried the communications array. The signal went out and came back. He tried again. Same. The commander was a veteran of 11 campaigns. He had taken 4 worlds. He had never in his career encountered a communications failure that was not caused by battle damage, and there was no battle damage on his vessel. His vessel was intact. His vessel was sitting above a station that his boarding team had neutralized. Except his boarding team was not responding either. He stood at the console and ran through the possibilities in order of probability, the way 11 campaigns had taught him to, and arrived at a conclusion that the order of probability had never before required him to reach. Someone was on the station who had not been there when the boarding team went in. Someone who had come from somewhere he had not detected. From the direction of empty space. He began pulling his force back to the ship. Greer, back inside the station and moving through the upper level with Flynn, picked up the Crothall withdrawal on the station's damaged sensor array. She got on the comm to Cole. "They're pulling back to the destroyer," she said. "Let them," Cole said. Greer understood. A withdrawing force was not a defeated force, but it was a force that had made a choice, and choices like that compounded. The Crothall were leaving because something had not gone the way they understood things going. They needed to recalculate. The recalculation would cost them time, and time cost other things. Burke's voice came on the comm from the Relentless. He sounded like a man who had just done something he wasn't sure he was allowed to do. "Captain, the Crothall ship is moving. I fired 2 rail shots at their engine block when they started the withdrawal. Non-lethal impact, no hull breach, but they'll be running slow." A pause. "I know I should have asked first," Burke said. "No," Cole said. "You shouldn't have." Another pause. This one was Burke figuring out whether that was a criticism or a compliment. It was a compliment. The Crothall destroyer moved away from the station and picked up its boarding team from the docking collar and ran. Running slow, as Burke had arranged, but running. Cole watched it on the station's damaged sensor feed until it bent into transit. Then it was just them and the station and the long quiet of space. Pierce sat down against the wall outside the command center. Not the way a person sits when they're resting. The way a person sits when their body has decided it is finished arguing with them about something. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes for exactly 5 seconds and then opened them again. Calloway walked past her, going in the other direction, and set a medkit on the floor next to her without looking at her or saying anything. Pierce looked at the medkit. Then she picked it up. Voketh came out of the command center and stood near Cole. He was looking at the corridor, at the evidence of what had happened in the last 2 hours. Then he looked at the Marines. Each one of them was already doing something, Greer checking her rifle, Ruiz working on a damaged section of door panel, Flynn mapping the station's remaining secure corridors on a handheld device. "They withdrew," Voketh said. "Yes," Cole said. "The Crothall have not withdrawn from anything in 60 years, Voketh said. Cole said nothing. "You knew they would?" Voketh asked. Cole thought about it. "I knew they'd go when staying stopped making sense to them," he said. "They're not stupid. They're just not used to this kind of problem." "What kind of problem?" Cole looked at him. "The kind that fights back in the corridors," he said. Voketh was quiet for a moment. His bioluminescence moved through a color that his species used when a map had to be redrawn from the start. "They will come back," he said. "More ships. Different numbers." "Yes," Cole said. "And you?" Cole was already looking at the corridor again. At the junction. At the geometry of the space. At the positions his unit had held and the positions they would adjust to next time, because there was always a next time and you learned from the first one or you didn't get a third. "We'll be in the corridor," Cole said. Voketh's bioluminescence shifted into something that had no name in Terran language and no equivalent in any species the Ethery had ever encountered. It was not fear. It was not admiration. It was what happens when a cartographer sees terrain that does not appear on any map and understands, for the first time, that the map was never complete. He had been mapping everything since they arrived. The Marines. The way they moved. The way they communicated in silence. The way the woman with the rifle had set the charges and gone EVA and come back and said nothing about either. His map had no room for any of it. He was going to need a new one. Pierce, against the wall with the medkit in her lap, made a sound that was mostly a laugh and partly something else. "You know what this station needs," she said to no one in particular. "Better coffee." "Calloway, from down the corridor, there's no coffee." "That's exactly what I said," Pierce told him. Cole almost smiled. Almost. Outside the viewport, the space where the Crothall destroyer had been was just space again. Black and clean and empty. As if nothing had happened there. That was what space was good at. Waiting for the next thing. So was Cole. 36 hours after the Crothall destroyer ran, the station was still. Not the still of before, that had been a held breath. This was different. This was the still of a place that had been through something and come out the other side, the way a field looks quiet after a storm has crossed it. Things were settled. Things were changed. The air tasted like old smoke and the deck plates had marks on them that weren't going to come out, and in 3 separate corridors there were structural repairs underway that would take weeks. But the station was standing. Pierce was in the medical bay. Not because Cole had made her go. He had strongly suggested it, which with Pierce amounted to the same thing. The wound in her side, which she had described as a graze during the engagement and which she described now as a medium-sized inconvenience, was in fact a deep gouge from a Crothall round that had found the gap between her chest plate and her side armor at exactly the wrong angle. It had not hit anything that would kill her. It had also not hit nothing. She was reading when Cole came to check on her. A thin book, worn soft from handling, bent back on itself the way books get when a person has carried them through too many deployments to keep them flat. "What is it?" Cole said. "Chosen Reservoir," she said. 1950. Cole looked at the cover. Marines in winter. Deep snow. A mountain that didn't care. "Good reading," he said. "It's very comforting," Pierce said, which sounded like a joke until you realized she meant it. Calloway was in the corridor outside the medical bay. Not because anyone had told him to be there. He had a deck of cards and he was playing against himself, which was an exercise in either discipline or self-defeat depending on how you looked at it. Cole stepped over his legs and went back to the command center. Voketh was there, and had been there most of the 36 hours. The Ethery commander had not slept, as far as anyone could tell. He had been at the central console mapping everything. The engagement, the positions, the timing, the decisions. Cole had seen him watching every Marine who came through the command center with the focused attention of a man converting observations into permanent records. "You're writing it down," Cole said. "Yes," Voketh said. "My people will need to understand what happened." "What will you tell them?" Voketh was quiet for a moment. His bioluminescence was a steady pale gold, which was his resting state, Cole had learned. It darkened when he was thinking hard and went white when something surprised him. In the last 36 hours there had been a lot of white. "I will tell them that there is a species in the Vareth corridor," Voketh said, "that we have been treating as a footnote." "And?" Cole said. "And footnotes," Voketh said, "should be read more carefully." Burke filed the engagement report from the Relentless. It was 22 pages long and detailed and accurate, because Burke was methodical in the way that people are methodical when they're young enough to still believe that accuracy is a kind of protection. He submitted it to Fleet Command with the knowledge that Fleet Command was going to have a significant reaction to the part where Cole had gone to Ethery space without authorization and started a fight with the Crothall destroyer. Burke had added, in the summary section, a note that the engagement had been defensive in nature and had resulted in 0 Terran casualties. He had also added, in smaller text, that the Crothall had withdrawn. He stared at those two words for a while before he submitted it. The Crothul had withdrawn. 60 years of expansion. 4 civilizations consumed. And then a 10-person marine unit in a maintenance corridor had made them do something they had never done. Burke submitted the report and sat back and looked at the ceiling of the bridge for a while. Greer was in the observation bay again. The same window. The same seat. But the view was different now because everything on the other side of something looks different from the other side of it. She wasn't listening to anything. The signal was gone. The silence where the signal had been was its own kind of sound. She thought about the 11 hours she'd listened to it on the way in. The shape of a civilization sphere, broadcast into the dark in every direction because there was nothing else left to do. She had recognized something in it. Not the species. Not the frequency. Just the shape. On the 4th day, a diplomatic communique arrived from the Crothul hegemony. It was addressed to the Etheri Conclave, which was standard. The Crothul did not address messages to species they did not formally acknowledge as significant, and they had not acknowledged Terrans as significant. But the content of the communique was not about the Etheri. It asked one question. It asked the identity and the political affiliation of the force that had engaged them at Leth 7. Voketh brought it to Cole on a data tablet. Cole read it. His face did not change. He handed it to Pierce, who had been allowed out of the medical bay on the condition that she did not climb anything or lift anything or generally behave like Pierce, a condition she had agreed to and which was already being violated in small, technically deniable ways. Pierce read it. "They want to know who we are," she said. "Yes," Voketh said. "What did you tell them?" Cole asked. "Nothing yet," Voketh said. "I wanted to ask you first." Cole thought about this for a moment. "Tell them the truth," he said. Voketh relayed the response through the diplomatic channel. A species designation. A home system. A short political description of the Terran Expeditionary Force. The response from the Crothul side came back in 2 hours, which was fast by diplomatic standards and which told Cole something about how much they were thinking about it. The response was not a demand. It was not a threat. It was another question. It asked, "Are there more of them?" Voketh looked at Cole. Cole looked at the data tablet. "Tell them," Cole said slowly, "that the Verith corridor runs adjacent to 14 Terran colony systems." Voketh sent it. No response came. That was, in its own way, the loudest answer Cole had ever received. On the 5th day, the Relentless prepared to leave. The station was stable enough. Voketh had a repair crew incoming from the nearest Etheri system. The immediate problem was managed. Cole walked through the station one last time before they boarded. Not inspecting it. Just walking it the way he walked everywhere he'd been, leaving the memory of it in his feet, taking the shape of it with him. Voketh met him at the docking collar. "The Conclave will request a formal diplomatic channel with Earth," Voketh said. "It is unusual for us to do this with a species we have not previously engaged. But it is appropriate." "It'll take a while," Cole said. "Our diplomatic processes are slow." "I will wait," Voketh said. "I have been mapping your species for 5 days. I have a great deal of revision to do." Cole looked at him. "What did your map say before?" Voketh's bioluminescence went a color Cole had never seen on him before. "It said you were quiet," Voketh said. "A small, quiet people in a corridor no one used." "And now?" Cole said. The bioluminescence settled. "Now," Voketh said, "I understand that quiet is not the same as empty." Cole shook his hand, or the closest equivalent 2 12-limbed beings and 1 bipedal mammal could manage, and walked into the docking collar. The Relentless detached from the station without a sound. Burke brought them back through the gravity shadow of the moon and into the Verith corridor. The same dark. The same long, patient nothing on all sides. Pierce was in the crew bay with her book. Calloway was cleaning things that didn't need cleaning because that was what he did when there was nothing to blow up. Greer was at the observation window. Cole stood at the viewport in the forward section and watched the corridor open up ahead of them. He'd been watching that corridor for 8 months. The same dark. The same nothing. The nothing felt different now. The Crothul knew the corridor existed. They knew what lived in it. They had asked how many there were and received an answer that had made them go quiet, and quiet was not nothing. Somewhere behind them, in a dead region of space that no one had considered important, the galaxy had learned something small and specific and very old. Some things that are quiet because they have decided to be. And when they stop deciding, the corridor changes. Everything changes. Cole put his hand flat on the cold viewport glass and left it there for a moment. Then he turned and went back to work.